This episode of That's What G Said podcast is brought to you by Cindy Carava, full-service realtor. Cindy Carava, the website cindycarava.com. She can help you out with anything that you need. We all know that one of the most difficult events in life is when you have to move and you have to relocate and everything that goes into that process. So you want to find someone that you can trust that can help you out, and Cindy is the perfect person to do so. If the name sounds familiar, she's the wife of horse racing trainer Jack Carava, who's been on the Southern California racing circuit for the last 30 years. She can help you with selling, purchasing, leasing, help you find vendors like handyman, painters, and landscapers, maybe if you're just looking to improve your home. If you are interested in getting pre-approved for a home loan, she can connect you with lenders that she works closely with. She covers the San Gabriel Valley and parts of North San Diego County, Del Mar, Solana Beach, Rancho Santa Fe. Maybe you're just interested in finding out how much your home is worth, a free market analysis. She will do that for you. And you can find all sorts of information about her on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. There are reviews on Yelp and Zillow. But the easiest way to find all the information, cindycarava.com. I've known her for a decade. She is one of the most honest and genuine people I have ever met. I trust her completely, and I'm sure that you will absolutely love all of your interactions with Cindy Carava. Go check her out. Or if you have any questions, just click and send her an email, cindyc.realtor@gmail.com. On this episode of That's What G Said, we're going to be talking lots of the NFL wildcard weekend. We have two interviews for you, so you'll get two different opinions on the games. First, it's going to be Scott Shapiro, and then we'll be talking with Paul Bovi. We'll go through all four of the games with both, and then at the end, we'll have some horse racing plays for Saturday and then a couple for Sunday. Kick back and enjoy this episode of That's What.
So you want your daily dose of sports and pop culture? Well, I know a guy named G who gives it to you good. That's what G said. From Game of Thrones and Stranger Things to DDTs and chicken wings and banking on a long shot to close. Will the Lakers bounce back? Did USC upset them? Will the Dodgers hop on all who oppose? It's gotta be our year. It's gotta be our year. It's gotta be our fucking year. That's what G said.
Happy New Year! We are into 2020. We had a little extended vacation here on That's What G Said over the last couple of weeks through the holiday season. I got a new family now, so we were all focused in on Christmas and New Year's. We had a lot of fun hanging out with Milo. I hope everyone out there had a great, safe, warm holiday season. It's a great time. This is a great time of the year, right? This is a lot of fun. This was the first time going through. Santa visited over here in Long Beach, so he was able to spoil Milo with plenty of gifts. And what you're seeing now as we move in from 2019 to 2020 is we're seeing a lot of best of the decade type shows. So we're going to have a couple of those coming up for you throughout the month of January, where we focus in on some of the things that happened over the last 10 years. We'll go through kind of my decade and where things have gone for me. We'll do it in sports also, and we'll kind of revisit it for social media. And just like TV shows have lots of things have changed, and we will have some decade recap shows coming up over the next month. But today, we're going to focus on the important stuff at hand. This weekend, we have lots of really big stuff in the world of football, and that's going to really be the focus of this episode. So first up, we will talk with Scott Shapiro. We're going to go through all four of the wild card games, and then afterwards we're going to talk with Paul Bovi, and we're going to do the same with him. So what you'll get is two completely different people with their opinions on the games, and then afterwards I'll give you my recap of how I'm going to play these weekend games, and then afterwards we'll close things out with some horse racing. So let's get right into the interview with our good friend Scott Shapiro. We're going to be talking wild card weekend. Happy to have back again here on That's What G Said podcast, our good friend Scott Shapiro. You know Scott from Bet America, from Twin Spires, the Who Do You Like podcast. We welcome Scott in. What else? You were on the Churchill feed now. You're all over the place. You're kind of like a jack of all trades. You have articles that come out, podcasts that come out, really like whatever they need over there from you, and that's what they're going to get from Scott Shapiro.
Hey, buddy. Happy New Year. Great to be back chatting with you. And I guess it's a little, different times of the year, different things. this football and Churchill Racetrack, and then in the summer more of a focus on like Saratoga, and then in the spring a lot of college hoops, and of course Kentucky Derby, a big part of things. But glad to be able to do all these things and kind of enjoy the fact that I can switch back and forth a little and not be locked into one thing 12 months a year.
So our focus will be on the big 4 wild card games this weekend, NFL playoffs beginning. Before we get into those 4 games, though, got to give you a minute or two to rant on your Wisconsin Badgers. I watched that Rose Bowl game against Oregon, and we're recording this on Thursday afternoon, so watched it last night, and man, just a bummer type game as a fan. And yes, as a better, but I think more as a fan, because you felt like you really dominated that game throughout, and just a couple turnovers and then a really, really bad call at the end of the game that really swung things. So like after you had a night to sleep on it, what are you thinking about that game?
Yeah, the bad call is one thing. I try not to dwell on that. I thought it was a terrible call, but we still had work left to do. But to turn the ball over 4 times when we really, other than that, I think we had had won the time of possession almost 2-1. We outgained them by a ton. I mean, our defense held them to like a record low. They didn't do much on offense at all other than really taking advantage of turnovers. And when you turn the ball over 4 times, you deserve to lose. But, it's hard to say we weren't the better team, which is frustrating. You're going to play plenty of big games where you're not the better team or where you're very equal. And, I thought we showed that we were a better team. But, pretty frustrating. That's kind of as big as it gets for Wisconsin football. We're probably never going to beat Ohio State ever, so we'll never get to the playoff. We just got to hope to finish second in the Big Ten.
And I'm kind of feeling that way as a fan of USC now. Like Oregon's starting to just take over California from a recruiting standpoint too. It's like we're just falling down. It was sad. I was talking to somebody yesterday about how like, wow, it's such a bummer. I used to remember watching USC in the Rose Bowl, like consistently it felt like. And so now as we move on from, I guess this year, towards the end of the year now, do you have any early thoughts on the national championship game now, where we're going to see a couple really, really good teams? I know you've been pretty high on Clemson the last like half of the year, and not who they've played, but just like high in general. LSU has been amazing, and the key, as we all were kind of figuring out, is who was going to get the number 1 ranking, because they basically got that Oklahoma game, and Oklahoma was not at the same level as LSU, Ohio State, and Clemson this year.
Yeah, it was such a big distinction between the top 3 teams and the rest of them, if you don't want to count maybe an Alabama or something. But, I thought it was completely – and I saw this coming a mile away, that LSU was going to roll Oklahoma, and then all of a sudden the public would think they would be unbeatable. Yep. It's tough to be completely against LSU in any spot right now. It's hard to pick at them, find things wrong with them. But, I got in at Clemson at +6. I think it's an overreaction. I mean, this game, from a pure betting perspective, long term, when you can get overreactions like this. I mean, this line, before the playoff and before it was announced that who was playing who, they were kind of, they had look-ahead lines. And this game was like pick. Yes. Clemson was favored 1.
Yes.
Then LSU, I could understand why LSU would be a 3-point favorite in this game, maybe 3.5.
Yes.
But Clemson hasn't lost in 28 games. Trevor Lawrence has never lost. It's very hard for me to not think this is relatively a coin flip. And give me the 6 points. I don't think, the defense that LSU faces in Clemson, anyone's going to struggle to stop Joe Burrow and crew, but it's not. These are light years apart. Clemson's defense and Oklahoma's, and we saw defenses like Auburn that are top tier defenses like a Clemson with the athletes and the speed. They don't totally stop.
Just slow
LSU.
them down though. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. 30-something points. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see why Clemson can't score in the 30s. Also, I thought they played as poorly as they could in that first half against Ohio State, especially on offense. Credit to the Buckeyes, but I'm on the dog in this one, just more from a overall betting perspective than thinking, hey, LSU can't win by 10 or something.
Yeah, and when I think Clemson, as they came off of a a weak conference or a conference where they're not going to be playing anyone like Ohio State, and then you play Ohio State and they hit you a little bit and you're not quite used to that level, and then you settle in the game and then you come back, and that was just a good football game between two really like top tier teams, you know, like back and forth. And so I think now they're steady. They faced a little bit tougher of a team. They kind of you weathered the storm a little bit, and this should be a really good game. I'm really excited for this national. Like some years, you know, the playoff is okay, or you kind of feel like there's one team, but I really do think these are two like top tier teams. LSU has been good all year; they've been excellent, and it's really tough to knock anything that Clemson's done over the last couple of years. They're just such an unbelievable program. They just spit out like pro player after pro player after pro player. They're well coached. They recruit. And I mean, like LSU is out there getting top recruits right now, stealing California recruits like yesterday while they're in the middle of prepping for the national championship. That just shows you how good these two programs are right now.
And so, it's just funny to me that, you know, I think it's like roughly 80% of the ticket count or something is going to be on LSU, and so many people in the public, that just think that because of that offense, they're just such a lock. So I just think Clemson's getting a little bit disrespected.
100%. I think that's the way to go if you're playing the game. Now let's move on to the NFL. We have 4 games. These next 2 weekends are great, and you know, generally I like next weekend a little bit better because you get better teams, but this is not a bad wild card weekend. We don't really have like that many bad teams that got into the playoffs this year. I think this is a pretty fun 4 games that we have, and you know, the big bad Patriots are even going to show up on wild card weekend, which we don't see too often. We'll start with the first game. We'll just go in order. Basically, if the Texans make the playoffs, they are playing in the first game of the of the playoff weekend. I believe all 6 times that they've made the playoffs now, they will be playing in the opening game on Saturday. They come into this game off of a loss, but it didn't matter. They were sitting their starters, so they weren't really focused too much on last week. It was really kind of just a get healthy game because they had already clinched the division. So right now, I think on Bet America, I'm seeing Texans minus 2.5 and the over-under something around 43.5. And they're going to be playing a feisty Bills team here. What are some of your thoughts on this matchup?
Yes, I agree with your macro point that I think we got all the best teams in. You could argue Eagles or Cowboys, but outside of that, I think the best teams made the playoffs this year. And, you know, I think the Bills are a better football team than Houston. Mm-hmm. And I especially think they're a better football team than Houston when Will Fuller is not playing to stretch the field and open things up for DeAndre Hopkins and the rest of that offense. And it seems at this point just that Will Fuller is unlikely to go. I've heard mixed thoughts until very recently, right before we started recording here, that it seems very unlikely he's going to play. Just a couple interesting stats. The Texans are the kind of team that when you don't expect them to play well, they do. And when they're expected to play well, meaning as a favorite, they're not very good. They're 1-6 this year against the number as a favorite. I'm presuming that as a home favorite, they're 1-5. And the last 3 years, that trend's been the same. As a favorite, they're 8-15 against the spread. And they usually lose those games too. It's not as if or often, I shouldn't say usually, that more, not always, I should take that back, but they're very capable of losing those games when they're favored. And I think that the Bills, the one concern you have is Josh Allen in his first start ever in the playoffs. He can be erratic at times. He's definitely got some talent versus Deshaun Watson, who got his feet wet last year against Buffalo. But outside of that matchup, I think Tre'Davious White can kind of hold his own against DeAndre Hopkins. Mm-hmm. And the Texans will get J.J. Watt back, but he won't be anywhere near at 100%. And I think John Brown and Cole Beasley can make some plays on the outside. And I just like the coaching matchup. Sean McDermott, to me, a much better coach than Bill O'Brien. So you don't get a lot of points, but I'll take the 2.5 and maybe even sprinkle a little bit in on the money line with the Bills.
Yeah, and these short home favorites aren't. I'm not a big trend guy. I only like trends usually when they're like relevant, same team, same coaching staff, like throughout the year type trends. But when you look at the home favorites of 2.5 or less on Wild Card Weekend, they are 1-9 against the spread, and all favorites are 2-14 against the spread when favored by 2.5 or less. So that's a pretty big number, just kind of letting you know that these teams aren't really better. You know, they're just kind of getting those extra points because they're at home. And how much does that matter, you know, right now with two teams that are kind of evenly matched? I do think these two teams are – you're right. I think Buffalo's a little bit better. The thing about Houston is over the last couple of years we've kind of – with Watt, when they have Clowney. We thought of Houston as this really good defense, and this team, and in particular the last couple years, they are really not at all. In particular, their secondary is really, really bad. If you're using like DVOA metrics, they're 22nd against the run. They're 26th against the pass. They're 25th in yards per rush allowed per game. So they just aren't good at all on defense.
Right.
Not against the run, against the pass, period. They can just allow you to score. So that's why I'm not quite as worried about Josh Allen, turning the ball over, because I don't know if this is the type of defense that is going to create those turnovers. And, you look at Allen, he's 9 rushing touchdowns, which led all QBs in rushing touchdowns. That's even more than Lamar. He had 500-plus yards rushing. And I think Houston runs the ball a little bit better than we think. Hyde actually had 1,000 yards this year, and you're going to get Watson in the mix. And then they catch the ball well out of the backfield with Duke Johnson. Like, I don't think this is going to be – I think it's going to be a tight game, but I'm kind of with you. I think just the fact that you can get some points and you probably get – some money line. Another couple of stats, like Houston's defense, they're second worst in the league in third down conversions, and they are dead last against red zone conversions. They've allowed 71% of red zones into touchdowns, red zone opportunities into touchdown, which is unbelievable. Like they're just not good when they need to make a big play. Where you look at Buffalo. And they're kind of the opposite. They're 7th best in third down conversion. And when they have someone like Allen with his legs who can move around and kind of pick up a play, that's the key. And I think you mentioned the key. The real key is Will Fuller, because Deshaun Watson is just like a completely different player when Fuller is around. The EPA, which measures your play's impact on the score of a game, is like absurd with Fuller. And then when you look without Fuller, it's like bad, really, really bad. And it's just been the same thing the last couple of years with this team. Their secondary's been bad, and they can't protect Watson, a whole lot. They got better in the middle of the year doing that, and then they started to struggle again late in the season. So I think the fact that we get a couple points in here, I'm going to lean with Buffalo, and it feels like you're going Buffalo 2 in here plus the 2.5 in the money line.
Yes, sir. And one thing just to add to your point about Josh Allen's rushing, and the Texans did give up the 7th most rushing yards to quarterbacks, so it's not as if, that can be somewhat random. You want to look back at the schedule a little bit and really dive in, but Allen's as good as just about anybody other than Lamar with his legs, and the Texans aren't great at stopping that, although Watt might help a little bit. Yeah,
it just looks like a lot of the metrics and stuff, the things that Buffalo does pretty well, Houston's not good at. Even like little things like passing plays of 20-plus yards. Allen's not consistent, but he can come up with a big play. The Bills are in the top half of the league in that. The Texans are 25th in the league in that. There just seemed like there are a lot of things that match up very well for the Bills in here. So let's.
I like this Bills team. I think they're fun to watch, and I hope they win.
Yeah, me too. They're like maybe one more. Like a big tight end or one more like pass catcher away from being good, and just like a little more improvement from Allen. But they could beat anybody. I just don't think they could win 3 or 4 games in a row against the top tier teams. But I wouldn't be shocked to see them beat anybody. Like I do not want to play all year long, even when the beginning of the year when they got off to a hot start, but they looked like they weren't very good. They've sustained it. They've actually improved as a team, even through some of the games that they've lost against better competition. And they feel like a team that I don't want to play. Like, I would not want to be one of these teams next week. I'd be rooting against the Bills. I do not want to play them next week.
I agree. If I'm the team that has an option of playing the Bills or Texans, I'd much rather play Houston.
Okay, let's move on to the Saturday night game. We do not very often see the Patriots playing in Wild Card Weekend. It is actually the first time they host a Wild Card game since 2009. And the key is, this is only the 4th time since 2001. In the last 17 years, they've made the play, which is absurd. 17 times since 2001, they've made the playoffs, and only 4 of them have been in the wild card game.
It's unbelievable. Never will happen again.
Yeah, they've never won a Super Bowl when being a wild card. This game opened, I think, at 4.5. You can get it anywhere kind of between 4 and 5. I think it's 5 right now on Bet America. Over-under is 44. And these two teams were both 9-7 against the spread this year. Kind of a tale of two teams, though, as far as like the Patriots, hot start, playing against really suspect competition early on, but doing what they were supposed to and beating them up. And then the Titans, you make the quarterback switch and everything changed to where the point where you're kind of what-ifing, wondering like, wow, if they would have started Tannehill, and maybe they don't lose another game or two. Like this team could have been battling for maybe a bye in a home game here because they played so well down the stretch. They beat some good teams. They were 7-3 with Tannehill as a starter. He had the best passer rating in the league, the most yards per attempt, and the most yards per reception, the most yards per catch. So just like really crazy numbers, 259 yards per game, which would have ranked in the top 10 for the full season, and that's more than New England per game. And he's just created a monster with A.J. Brown. But this game I kind of have the least feel for, I think, of the 4 games as far as, like, I could see anything happening. I know a lot of people are going to go against the Pats because they've looked so bad lately. They could bite us, but they really do not look like the same Pats team over the last few years. Like, where do you stand?
Well, I think the first thing you have to think is, well, if this wasn't the Patriots, which you have to give credit to Bill Belichick, this line wouldn't be 5, right? From what we've seen recently, it'd probably be more like 3 or 2.5. But you got to give credit to Belichick. He's certainly worth points. And you mentioned Tannehill. They averaged 16 points a game in the first 6 games with Mariota and 30.4 over the last 10 now. Some of that wasn't against the greatest competition, but that's a huge, huge leap. And he's been awesome. But they're still going to lean on the running game, and they did this throughout this whole run in Derrick Henry. I don't know. I mean, the Patriots defense didn't play a lot good last week against the Dolphins, and they've looked a lot more beatable since after that 8-0 start against the weaker competition. But I've got a strong feeling that Belichick's going to come up with a game plan, and they're going to play a really good game on defense. That being said, I don't know how you can lay nearly close to a touchdown with the Patriots the way they're playing offense right now. I mean, I've been waiting for them to turn it on for seems like the whole year. Brady's not his accurate self. Their offensive line is not that good. They're just not that good, and that means they can't run the ball. Sony Michel looks slow. You know, they just are not dynamic on offense. Julian Edelman's banged up. And N'Keal Harry's been okay, but you can't. Philip Dorsett. They just don't have a lot on offense.
They've scored 24 points only once since that 8-0 start.
Right.
And
so how are you laying? How can you not it's scary to bet against the Patriots. That's the only reason not to bet the Titans in this spot to me, right?
There's too much. You're 100% right. There's too much when you're looking at this game of when you look at how they match up, when you look at the numbers, when you look at the way these teams have been playing as of late, and how Tennessee can very easily, they can run the ball, they can move the ball. Like, they have weapons, this Tennessee team, man. They have Henry on the ground, who is your rushing champ. He had 211 yards against some backups last week, but he's the rushing champ, and he missed a game. He didn't play a couple weeks ago. Also, in the last 8 games, the Pats have been outscored in the first half 97-75. So if they get down early, they're going to just have to deal with a steady dose of Henry. And that's when that's actually the weakness of the really good Pats defense. You can run the ball against them. Their strength is their secondary, and Stephon Gilmore, who is going to be one of the best defensive players this year. He actually. And that's another issue, is that he's coming off of a game where he really struggled last week, and he got absolutely torched by Parker from Miami, who had 130 yards receiving. So your best defensive weapon is coming off of really the first time all year where he got torched, and you're going to have to deal with an A.J. Brown, whose last 6 games, he's averaging 100 yards per game. And so Tennessee is a pretty well-built team. Like, their defense is right down the middle. They're not really weak. Where they are weak is the red zone, just like we were talking about with the Texans. So if the Pats can get into the red zone, the Titans are actually the second worst team in the league in that red zone defense. In the red zone defense, they are 31st. They allow 68% of red zone trips into touchdowns. So not very good for the Titans and the Texans, who both got in. But I mean, I'm with you. I think I could see the Patriots squeaking out a close win and winning by a field goal here. But when you're getting the additional point and a half, 2 points on top of that 3, I think you have to lean Tennessee in here. This is of the 4, probably the least strong opinion, but I think it's just too much. I think that you'll probably get one more good game here from the Patriots, enough to squeak out a win. And then, I just don't think they're in the same top tier to be able to deal with, a Kansas City or a Baltimore.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like the Titans, and I think I like the under a little bit. 44. I'm
I kind of
expecting
agree.
Belichick to take away some of the strengths. I mean, I can't see Gilmore getting toasted again,
No.
especially by a rookie. I assume he'll be on Brown. Corey Davis had a real good game against them the last time they played, though. So, Corey Davis has been a little bit of a disappointment, to say the least, as a high first-round pick. As a receiver, usually those are pretty short fire. But yeah, I think this is going to be I could see like a 2017 Patriots win type deal.
Yeah, Vrabel knows Belichick too. He was
Yep.
around him for 8 years with the Pats. They won a couple Super Bowls together, and so these teams are familiar with each other. I would lean
Let
Patriots
me
winning the game, but Titans I think will cover.
let me ask you this one question: Would you rather, if you're the Ravens, would you rather, or the Chiefs, however it would work out? It seems to me like if the Titans, it sounds silly to say, but I just can't see the Patriots going in. I mean, I wouldn't have said this a couple weeks ago, but that Dolphins game was just shocking. I can't see the Patriots going in and beating the Chiefs.
Me neither.
But the Ravens, would you rather play the Bills or Texans or the Titans? Titans have like a little more upside, right?
I completely agree because, like we
Yeah.
said, with this Titans team, we're getting a sample size of like 10 games. If we were expanding it a little bit, this team could have been better than they were. Like they haven't been fluky. And even the games where they've lost, like they have some weaknesses is that, they don't protect the quarterback all that well, but they run the ball pretty well, so they can mix it up a little bit. Tannehill can elude some pressure if need be. I like this Titans team. I'm with you. I wouldn't want to play this team. And
Yeah.
I know a lot of Patriots fans that were like, this is one team that I didn't want to have to play.
Right.
And
because they went from having off and then getting a home game to having to play the Titans and then go to Kansas City. I mean, that was a horrible loss to the Dolphins for them.
So yeah, they might be getting a Dory Jackson back too. I mean, I always thought he was as a USC fan, I actually did always think he was a little overrated as far as like his cover ability, but he gives them a little bit of a wrinkle. He might be able to return a punt or two too if they need. So that just helps.
Yep.
Just giving another weapon to.
They got to protect Tannehill. That's the one thing you said. He's a different quarterback, like most of these guys. But if he doesn't get protected, I could see him. The game early, I could see him having a down game. But
the one place where the Pats could succeed is the Titans struggle defending running back pass catchers. So this could be James White, could be a little Burkhead catching passes out of the backfield. I think the Titans are 29th in receptions allowed against the running back, and they are 23rd in yards allowed against the running back. So that might be where New England has to feast, because if Edelman's banged up, he can't get the separation. There just aren't any other scary weapons there. You mentioned their offensive line hasn't been good. They haven't been giving Brady enough time. So, yeah, I think I'm kind of with you in all of it. I think it's a low-scoring game. I still think the Patriots probably win in a close one, but I couldn't go anything over like 3 with the Patriots. I couldn't lay anything over that. So the fact that it's up around 5 right now just is way too much to me.
I'm with you. Dogs in the
Dogs, and it is kind of interesting that we have this year. They usually don't do the both AFC games and then both NFC games. But I think they wanted to get the Pats in the primetime game. And then a couple, we have 4 good teams playing on Sunday. Unfortunately, the Vikings, they laid an egg a couple weeks ago. They're not quite the same team without Dalvin Cook firing on all cylinders. We don't know what version of Dalvin Cook we're going to get. He hasn't had 4 yards per carry in a game since week 8. So even when we did see him recently, he seemed a little banged up, which has always kind of been his Achilles heel. But we have the Saints, I believe, as an 8-point favorite. This game is over under around 50 right now. I think it opened up a little less than that, and the money has moved the Saints' way, which you probably doesn't surprise you with Minnesota coming off a couple lackluster games. The last week of the season game didn't matter at all for them. They were locked into this spot. But it is crazy how much movement there was in the NFC, all because of that Seattle-San Francisco game, which ended up forcing the Saints, to me, who is one of the best teams in football and maybe one of the most complete teams overall, and, they're favored in this game, and it's a home game, but you never want to have to play that extra game. You never want to have to play on this weekend if you don't have to. And so this definitely doesn't help the Saints' chances to win a Super Bowl any. I do think they're going to be pretty tough in this spot, though.
Yeah, it was funny. I was rooting I think the Saints are the best team in the NFC. I think, as well. Maybe you didn't fully commit to that, but I will.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. But when I was rooting for the Packers to come back in that game because I wanted this matchup, because I think these are two teams that are coming into the playoffs totally opposite. The Saints, remember last year, their offense was awesome through 12 games, and then they played the Cowboys on Thursday night and got shut down that game by the Cowboys defense. And they just never really got back to that dominant self. And then
there was a breeze. Is he hurt? Maybe rumblings, and
they were still great. I mean, they should have made the Super Bowl, as we know, but they weren't offensively as dominant. It was more of a defensive grind it out. And then this year, kind of looked like the same thing for a little while. And of late, though, they have really exploded. They're averaging 36.2 points a game since that weird game off the bye week against the Falcons. In the middle of the season. They finally got Alvin Kamara going in the last couple games, finding the end zone twice in both of them. Breeze is looking like the stud that he always has been. Obviously doesn't throw the deep ball quite as well, but when you got Michael Thomas, just in, he's pretty good at football. I mean, 149 catches, I believe. I don't think the Vikings are going to have an answer for this offense at all. And the Saints, we all think offense with the Saints, but their defense is good. They've got basically a Pro Bowler, even though one didn't get in at all three levels. DeMario Davis should have been in the Pro Bowl. He might be their best offensive player. They got Marshawn Lattimore, who's a shutdown corner, and they've got Cameron Jordan up front, who is a Pro Bowler as well. So they were only allowing 91.3 yards a game on the ground. So if Dalvin Cook's even 100%, it's going to be tough to run the ball, and I don't see that happening. And the Vikings, they remember that game last year in Week 17 when they needed to get in the playoffs and they just didn't even show up against the Bears, who didn't have anything to play for. Well, they did the same thing against the Packers on Monday night, Week 16. I mean, they were just a beat slow, and I just don't trust Kirk Cousins in a game like this. It just has the recipe to me for a potential blowout. I'm very willing to lay the 8. I was hoping it would be 6.5 when I was dreaming it up, this scenario going into Week 17. But I'm not going to get discouraged by the number because I just think this is a mismatch.
Yeah. When we talk about how we like the Saints overall, they're the number 2 ranked team in weighted DVOA, which will kind of weight the end of the season and will take into account like how good your opponents are and little things like that. The Saints won 6 of their last 7. They scored 34 points or more in 6 of their last 7. In their last 3 games, they scored a touchdown 80% of the time they got into the red zone, which is
pretty
just
good. Yeah.
Firing on all cylinders. They're top 10 in third down conversions. And this isn't their running game is just good. This isn't as good of a running game as it was last year, but their pass game, as you mentioned, they're really firing on all cylinders. They have the number 3 passing offense, the number 4 overall offense, and obviously Michael Thomas, he breaks the record for most receptions ever. But to me, it's Jared Cook, because they've always kind of needed that other receiver, and we always are trying to find who's going to be the next receiver. But now we look at Jared Cook. He's averaged over 70 yards receiving per game in the last 6. He's had 9 receiving touchdowns this year. And I just think the Saints are too good. To me, they are, I think, as good as, I think Baltimore's a little bit better, and Baltimore, what they've done throughout the season, maybe a little bit more impressive. But to me, I think the Saints are as good as any team. And I was a little bummed only that they had to play this extra game, because I thought they were going to be really tough winning the NFC. And now if they have to go on the road and maybe play the 49ers team, it's not going to be like a cold weather thing. So maybe that really won't matter if that ends up happening. But I'm with you. If I was going to play a team to win it all, this might be one of those teams I'd throw a few bucks on money line, because it's a little higher because they have to play the additional game versus some of the teams with the bye. So I would lean Saints also in here minus the 8. And before we move on to the final game, any other Saints Vikes thoughts?
Yeah, well, plus 600 on Bet America right now to win it all.
Yep.
Not bad. Yep. It's interesting. The 2 favorites are both from the AFC, and then you got the Niners at plus 400. And then maybe even a little bit of a better bet, plus 240 to win the NFC, with the Niners being plus 150 favorites. The cold weather game in Green Bay scares me. I just kind of think the Saints are due to get a little lucky, too, in the playoffs.
No, you're right.
I can't believe they keep bouncing off the mat. Normally teams that lose the games like that in the playoffs come back at total regression,
Flat.
Yep.
And that's what I'm curious as we'll kind of transition, and this is a good transition because what happened in that Seattle-San Francisco game, like if Seattle gets in, then the Saints don't have to play this game. The entire seeding of the NFC is completely different. Who's playing this weekend? Who has home games? And it was funny. I blame Seattle as much themselves for the way they handled, the delay of game and their clock management and how they handled things down the stretch, not being able to get into the end zone. There was a terrible missed call that should have been looked at. So, it's like, again, the Saints getting screwed by the referees, even in a game that they were not playing, even in a game that they were not playing in, They just seem to be on the wrong side of every call. And that'll transition us over to our final game, the Sunday night game, where we saw an Eagles team. They've been a pretty fun team to root for, mainly because Dallas was just such a tough team to root for this year because they have so much talent and they just crap the bed so many times and with their coaching staff, and they just seem like heartless and gutless in a lot of weeks where they just didn't really put up a lot of fight. And then you have this Eagles team and Carson Wentz, who's become the first quarterback ever to throw for 4,000 yards and not have one 500-yard receiver. They're just literally the definition of next man up. We don't know the names of any of these players. Boston Scott has become a legend. Is it going to be enough for them to win this game? I will say what's nice for them is they're playing against another team that is, if there was any team close to as banged up as Philly, it would be the Seattle team.
Yeah, definitely. They're going to probably be without Dwayne Brown, their left tackle. They're definitely going to be out without Michael Kendricks, a linebacker. It remains to be seen if Quandre Diggs, their safety, who really bolstered a really below-average pass defense when he came over from Detroit. He's hoping to come back. But, yeah, it doesn't look like Zach Ertz is going to play. Brandon Brooks and Lane Johnson, the whole right side of the Eagles line, is probably going to be out. Maybe Lane goes, but the one thing I'll say, and I'm going to use a couple stats with the Eagles that you've been using that are great stats to show you about efficiency when taking advantage of opportunities. The Eagles score on 96% of their trips to the red zone, which is very good. Wow. And 67% of them are touchdowns, which is third in the NFL. And they're fourth in converting third downs. And these are so important because they don't have the big play guys, They have Miles Sanders. He's banged up. He doesn't have a high ankle sprain like they once thought, so he's probably going to play. They got Boston Scott. They've got Dallas Goedert, so they're lucky to have another tight end. A lot of teams without Zach Ertz would have nobody. Goedert, a very high drafted player as well, but they love to run those two tight end sets, so it's going to hurt to not have Ertz, who's their best offensive player. But, I don't know what I think of Seattle. They don't get a pass rush. They're not going to be able to run the ball a little bit, not at all against the Eagles without Chris Carson and Rashad Penny. The Eagles have one of the best rush defenses in the league, and I just think Seattle is. If this game's close, Seattle's going to stubbornly. That's just the way they are. That's the way they're built. They're just going to continue to run the ball and maybe punt a lot. If they really open this game up, like I think a lot of coaches would, and let Russell just make plays, I would really like Seattle. But
sure.
But that's not their mantra, and I think it's going to hurt them. It's going to keep the game close, and it's always scary to bet against Russell Wilson in close games. We saw him come. He's such a magician when he has to come back in these games. But I lean Eagles here. It's the game that I have the weakest opinion on. I know you said that with the Patriots Titans, but gun to head, I would go with the home team getting 1.5 points. I think. Yeah,
and this is another case of the favorites that we mentioned, the 1-9 wild card weekend. This is one where they're 14-2, the just favorites overall of less than 2.5 points. And so this is one where you might want to take the home team with the Eagles. Seattle all year was one of those teams that if you watch their games, it was like, and especially if you bet against them, you felt like they were just getting lucky, like over and over. I
saw you tweet that a couple times.
And it was like, man, I mean, the game, one thing, a stat I saw after the game, if Zierlein makes the field goal for 44 yards that he misses against Seattle, the Rams would have been in the playoff. They'd be like the Rams are in the playoffs. And then everything really changes even more. So it just kind of shows you they were lucky, and then they finally didn't get lucky, and that game changed so much of, man, could you imagine for them needing to get healthy and having this week off right now and trying to get some of their backs healthy and trying to get some of their offensive line healthy and some of the players that they they missed last week. I mean, they're literally bringing in running backs, Marshawn Lynch, who was taking shots in Oakland 3 weeks ago, and he was running 12 times last week. So I think that it's a fun matchup just because it feels like if either one of these teams was playing somebody else, it'd be unfair because they're both so injured. So the fact that they drew each other, it feels like it should be at least sort of even. But it's so hard when you look at the metrics for this game because everything that you look at shows you how good Seattle was running the ball, and they just aren't the same team. Like none of that matters anymore because they don't have Carson, they don't have Penny, the line isn't quite as good. You mentioned a really key point. If Pete Carroll, who, every year that I watch him, I just become more disappointed in him overall as a coach. I think he's obviously a good coach, and he gets the most out of a lot of his players. But when it comes to like tactical stuff, going for it on fourth down, being aggressive, like things like that, he's not very good. And you mentioned he's very stubborn about trying to run the ball. Because if they throw the ball, there were only 5 teams that allowed more yards to wide receivers than the Eagles. The Eagles were 25th in yards per completion allowed, and we're looking at a Seattle team that had 2 wide receivers almost go over 1,000 yards with Metcalf and with Lockett. Like Metcalf is a stud. Lockett was a little banged up, but he's really good. Like he's even more than the deep threat that we used to. He can be a possession type receiver for you too. So it's just, will they get outside the box? And I trust that the Eagles and their coaching staff are going to do a better job of focusing on the things that Seattle is not good at. Like, the Seattle's bad against tight ends and running backs catching passes. I think those are things that are going to be key with Goddard, you mentioned, with someone like Boston Scott, who's been coming out of the backfield, if it is Miles Sanders. So to me, I'm leaning with the home team. You're getting a couple points in here. I would probably play this money line with the Eagles. I kind of felt it always feels this way because the two times that we've had playoff teams get into the playoffs with an under 500 record. It didn't happen this year. The Eagles aren't under 500. But the 2 times where it happened, they got that home game and they won. And it always feels like, we think this division, we think these teams aren't good all throughout the year. But I always kind of was feeling like if whoever the Eagles or the Cowboys played were going to be in trouble in this first game. Because these aren't bad teams. The Cowboys are more talented. I think the Eagles are better coached, and they could beat anybody in one game when they have a home game. I just don't think this Eagles team is going to be deep enough to win 3 or 4 games in a row against top-tier competition. This is a great draw for them, though. This is a great draw, getting a Seattle team, and I'm gonna go Eagles in here and play them the money line.
Yeah, just to add a couple things. Since the bye week, the Eagles defense has been really good at home. They've given up 17 in 3 games to the Pats, Seattle, and Giants, and then 9 in that game to Dallas. And Russell Wilson is just 2-4 straight up and road playoff games. So as much as he seems, you fear him, he's lost more than he's won, and he needs to win this one for you to get the money. And just a reminder, these teams did play earlier in the year in Week 12. I remember the Eagles were a 1-point favorite that day, but the public, one of the more popular public sides all year in the NFL was being on Seattle. They came through winning 17-9 and probably should have won that game by more. But the one thing to keep in mind is the Eagles D has gotten better as the year goes on. They were absolutely horrific against the pass to start the year. They've gotten some guys back. Mills, Darby's not going to play, but Sidney Jones playing a little bit better. So, that's the big fear if you're playing with taking the Eagles is that, you could picture Lockett and Metcalf making big plays like you said. But I think I lean a little with the Eagles and their defense here at home in front of what'll be a raucous crowd like usual.
Well, that is Wild Card Weekend. The games start on Saturday, the 2 games on Saturday in the AFC, and then the 2 NFC games on Sunday. Scott, before we let you go, let everyone know where can we find you and what you'll be working on coming up soon.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at ScottShap34. As you mentioned, I do a podcast each week, the Who Do You Like podcast. It's all football during football season, and then I will be doing a lot more horse racing, some college basketball, and golf during the off season. And then you can find my writing at extra.betamerica.com, which is the blog for Bet America Sportsbook.
Scott Shapiro, always happy to have you, buddy. We'll be talking again, and when we talk next, we'll probably be more into college basketball, maybe even a little horse racing, and who knows, maybe we'll do something similar like we did last year. It's crazy to say that we're already getting towards the time where baseball season's coming up, but we did the over under podcast last year when we went through some of the baseball projections. It's crazy that the new year and we're not too far away from pitchers and catchers reporting to spring training. So constantly moving in the world of sports.
Yes, sir. That was good. We did good work with baseball this year. We'll be lucky to get anywhere near as good a result.
Yeah, exactly. I'd have to quit while we're ahead on that one. Yeah, that'll be one for the Hall of Fame. So, Scotty, buddy, thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Gino.
Big thanks to Scott Shapiro there for the discussion. Talked a little Liscani, unfortunately, and you'll hear Scott, a good friend and one that we always like to talk football. But anything that we can talk with, we'll bring in Scott, because I know. Before we get into our next interview with Paul, I want to mention one of the sponsors of That's What G Said podcast, Sarah Candle Company. SarahCandles.com, C-E-R-A, candles.com. Sarah means candle in wax, and Sarah means wax in Italian. Smoke another one here, Gino, huh? The goal of Sarah Candles is to create a candle 100% natural, clean burning, and of the highest quality that everyone can enjoy. A couple reasons why Sarah Candles are the absolute best. The all-natural soy wax. It's free from the toxins found in the paraffin wax, which is used by other leading brands. The all-natural soy wax will actually hold your scent better and burn up to 50% longer than the traditional paraffin wax candle. 100% lead-free cotton wicks, completely natural scents, made in micro batches, hand-poured to ensure the highest quality, 100% locally sourced and handcrafted in the USA, 25 different scents available, 3 different sizes, fragrance oil that are infused with natural essential oils, the best ingredients, quality packaging, affordable prices, longer burning, none of those toxins, carcinogens, or pollutants that are present in paraffin wax. Like anything, you have to take care of it. You have to take good care of your candle, especially because it's an open flame around. So there are instructions and there are details on how to keep your candle clean and how to ensure the perfect burn. This company was created by people who just love candles. They started out experimenting, trying to create the perfect candle, and now they've blossomed into Sarah Candle Company. Through research, they were able to discover the benefits of the all-natural soy wax. And if you use the promo code GINO, it'll get you 10% off of your purchase. So use that promo code GINO. Sarah Candle Company. Visit sarahcandles.com. Now we get into Paul Bovi, professional handicapper, real sharp. We're going to do a similar discussion with Paul as we had with Scott, where we go through all 4 of the games this weekend. So sit back and enjoy Paul Bovi. Very happy to be welcoming in a new guest today. It's going to be his first time here on That's What G Said. It's actually going to be my first time actually really talking on the phone with, I guess we're over Skype, with Paul Bovi. We've discussed sports quite a bit over the last couple of years on social media, some racing stuff, some basketball stuff. Always interested in reading some of the write-ups that Paul has. And as we welcome in Paul, it's been a really good NFL year for you so far, Paul. I've seen some of your selections, and I've seen a lot of your write-ups, and I'm looking at your NFL picks to date for the season. I think you're at 75, 46, and 5, which is just incredible, around 62%. So welcome into the show, and great year so far.
Yeah, thanks, Gino. It's great to be here. I've watched it on TVG back in the day, and I always admired the work you did. And, yeah, it's been a great year. No complaints, couple bad beats in there, but you always remember the bad ones. You forget the lucky ones. But, yeah, I believe it's 77-45, 3 ties, and looking forward to an excellent weekend here.
Just great stuff. So let everybody know out there. Let's get a little background for you. How'd you get into gambling in general? Have you been someone that always was playing races and playing games from below? Who was kind of your influence, and kind of tell us through your history, how you got to this point?
You know, I started when I was 10 years old. My father took me to the track, and probably the worst thing that happens is when you go to the track the first time, you win money.
Yep. You're set for life.
You're addicted for life. And then I got into sports betting, and I was a guy in junior high school. I always had a bet on the game. And look, I remember a Super Bowl and having 25 cents and having 50 cents on the Immaculate Reception with Franco Harris, losing the bet on the strength of that deflection. And it's just grown from there. I worked on Wall Street, and I was a recreational bettor up until the early 2000s, and I became a little bit more focused in on winning, became a online sports handicapper affiliated with Vegas Insider around about 2004, and it's just grown from there. And I play every game that I'm on, and I'm on them heavily sometimes. So the sports handicapping just keeps me in the limelight. I like to see my record, so to speak, compete, and that's where I'm at. I love doing what I'm doing, and I love winning.
And we're very happy to have you here. And we're going to break down the 4 games this weekend because we have the wild card weekend coming up in the NFL. It's a lot of football going on right now with bowl games, and we've kind of gotten through the bulk of the bowl season now with just a few of the real good games left. And now we have the focus in on the NFL playoffs. So we're going to go through each of the games this weekend. Let's start with the 2 games on Saturday. First one is Bills at the Texans. This game opened up 3.5. It looks like it's down to 2.5 most places. Bills at the Texans, over under is 43.5. What are some of your thoughts on this game?
The total has drifted up from 39 to like 43, as you say. And I think they got the number right. But this, to me, is the hardest game to predict. Part of that has to do with J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt, when he's in the lineup, huge difference in the Texans' defense, which has been very suspect since he went out of the lineup. Their pass rush efficiency dropped from 16th to 31st, and yards given up to opposing quarterbacks went from 4.1 to 5.3, which is a critical factor given the fact that Josh Allen is a mobile quarterback and he'll take off, and he doesn't need a lot of incentive to do it. So I don't know how much or how effective J.J. Watt can be here because personally I had a torn pectoral and still feel the effects. It's one of those injuries where you can't put any stress on the area or it'll just set you back. So I'm not sure how much he's going to play, how many snaps, but both quarterbacks here have been very erratic. Josh Allen, 20 touchdown passes, 9 interceptions. Deshaun Watson, 26 and 12. He's had 4 games where he's thrown for less than 190 yards. And then you have the Will Fuller factor here because when he's in the lineup, they are much more effective offensively. He's been out of the lineup for 5 games, and there is a market drop-off. The Bills are an excellent defensive team. I mean, they're second in the league in terms of total points, but you can move the ball against them. Brady has his best game against the Bills 2 weeks ago since week 2. And this is going to be a tight game. And again, those factors are going to weigh in heavily, and I'm not quite sure how they're going to land.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tight game too. I'm going to lean with the Bills in this spot just because if it's tight and we're going to get the points, I'm going to take the Bills. I like the fact that they've seemed like early on in the season they were beating up on a really poor schedule. That is one thing with these two teams is that the Texans played a much tougher schedule throughout the year than the Bills did. But I like the fact that the Bills seem to really improve even when they lost some games against some better teams down the stretch. One thing that you mentioned too, they're kind of a bend but don't break defense. They're very good limiting red zone opportunities, but they're, in the middle of the field, you can move the ball on them a little bit. I think some of the key factors are, as you mentioned, J.J. Watt. Are we going to get actual Watt, or is this going to be, maybe something that can give them a little bit of an emotional boost? I still don't know how much you're going to get from him out on the field. And the favorites on Wild Card Weekend at 2.5 or less are 2-14 against the spread. I'm not usually a trend type person, but I think it just kind of shows you that when you have these games when they're evenly matched and you're only getting those couple points that are probably the home field advantage points anyways, I don't think there's a lot of difference between these two teams. I actually think the Bills right now might be the better team. And the keys, you mentioned a couple keys, Watt and healthy, Watt and Fuller. If Watt's Watt and his Fuller's out there giving them an opportunity to stretch the field a little bit, Houston's a completely different team. If not, they're a very mediocre team that we saw throughout the second half of the year where they're a win, lose, don't really string it together, and they're not very good when they're favored. They're not very good when they're favored at home. So, I'm leaning – I think it's going to be a close game, and I would lean the Bills, take a few points. I'd probably take this game money line, and and assume that it's going to come down to Josh Allen. Can he make a big play? Can he limit the turnovers? And can he, stretch the field a little bit? And can he use his legs to pick up a third down? Because when you look at the Texans defense, a couple areas where they really, really struggle. They are second worst in the league against third down conversions, and they are dead last against red zone conversions. They've allowed 71% of teams in the red zone to score a touchdown, which is just atrocious. So I think a couple small factors make me lean Buffalo. But of the 4 games, I do think this one's going to be one that's going to be really close, really tight, and this should be a fun game. What I like about this weekend, Paul, is generally in wild card weekend, we'll get a couple teams that don't look very good. I'd say of the 4 games, this is probably the game with 2 of the weaker teams that have made it. But these are all pretty solid teams that are in the playoffs this year. There aren't really any free spaces or any teams that look like they kind of back their way in.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is going to be a competitive game. And when you look at a game like this, live wagering comes into play. Yes. So let's say Houston jumps out to a 7-0 lead, and then the number goes up to, let's say, 6, 5.5, 6. You grab Buffalo, and, I think it's a good chance that Buffalo is going to – they'll be trading back and forth. So that's probably the way I'm going to play it. I'll also look at a prop. I do believe Josh Allen is going to go over his season average in terms of rushing yards. He's accumulated 510 yards so far this year, or through the regular season, which is 32 a game. But he doesn't hesitate to run, and I think you're going to see that because when quarterbacks are a little tense and nervous, rather than throw the ball downfield, they just take off, and I think he'll have the opportunity to do that, and he may bust one off, and you may get this one early.
Yeah, you got over 510 yards rushing for him. He actually leads the league in quarterback rushing touchdowns, even more than Lamar. He had 9 rushing touchdowns this year. So, as you mentioned, especially when it comes to making a big play, he does not mind just tucking it and running there. Bills-Texans will be the first game on Saturday morning, and then Saturday evening, we don't see this too often, Paul, where we have the Patriots playing here on Wild Card Weekend. They are playing on this weekend for the first time since 2009, and right now I see Pats -5 out there. You can get probably 4.5 some places. Over-unders 44. Both of these teams were 9-7 against the spread this year, and we kind of have a tale of, different stories of the season. The Pats were so hot to start the year, beating up on inferior competition, and then they struggled down the stretch with their offensive line, with scoring points. And then you have a Tennessee team, as soon as they made the quarterback switch, they've just been a completely different team. Their offense is firing on all cylinders, and they've become a good football team. What's your thoughts on this game?
Well, you made a great point there because the Patriots in the last 8 weeks have eclipsed 24 points one time, and that was against the Cincinnati Bengals, and it was helped along by Andy Dalton, 4 interceptions. Patriots only had 290 yards that game. Tom Brady, 128, and he's had several poor performances this year. So when you look at that, and then you look at the other side where Tennessee, since Ryan Tannehill has been inserted into the lineup, they have not failed to score at least 20. In fact, in 5 of the last 7, they scored at least 31. And 2 of those, there were 2 of those that they did not, one of which was against the Saints, where they put up 28. And then you had the game against the Texans. And I consider that a very fortunate win for Houston because Tennessee was going to go in and get the first score. And there was a interception fumble at the goal line. The ball was dislodged from the receiver. It popped up in the air. Merciless took it 90 yards the other way. And instead of a 7-0 deficit for Houston, it went 7-0 in favor of the Texans. Tennessee, with Ryan Tannehill, obviously has been a much better offensive team. They get back possibly Adoree Jackson, who is their second best corner. Their best corner is Logan Ryan. 113 tackles, 4 sacks, 18 passes defended. So I think they'll match up with a very pedestrian offense that has had trouble moving the ball. And by the way, that game against Miami Sunday, that was real. Miami actually blew a couple scoring opportunities. There was a drop by Albert Wilson, which would have resulted in points. They failed on a fourth down conversion at the Patriot 40. They had no answers.
They went 75 yards in the final 3 minutes for a game-winning touchdown too. It was not fluky. They were the better team. Fitzpatrick was over 300 yards. Gilmore got absolutely torched by Parker. So that was what was concerning too, Paul, to kind of piggyback your point. One of the strengths all year of the Patriots was their defense, their secondary, and that got beat up and lit up last week by a Dolphins offense.
Well, the key here is Jason McCourty, because he's been out the last couple of weeks, and he is instrumental in their pass defense. So if they get him back, and they're going to need him, because Tennessee, even though they're without Adam Humphries, they still have some very competent receivers out there, namely A.J. Brown, who exceeded 1,000 yards. So they're going to need McCourty back. But I have to side with the points here, because makes no sense to me that the Patriots would be 2 points better on a neutral field the way these two teams have been playing.
I think it's just a lot of the reputation. It really is. We was talking with Scott Shapiro about some of these games also that we had on the show earlier, and similar, it's just the reputation, right? It's just built in. You get those extra few points built in because it's the Patriots. If you're just looking at these two teams and the way they've played down the stretch, even the game that you mentioned against the Saints when the Titans lost was a game when Henry wasn't playing. They've just been a good team. They're well-rounded now. Their defense is solid, and their offense has been excellent since Tannehill took over as a starter, and they've been 7-3 with those 22 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. He has the best passer rating in the league, the highest yards per attempt, and the highest yards per catch in the league. And he's turned A.J. Brown, who's very skilled, into just an absolute monster. And I think this is just a well-rounded team. Another point, the Patriots have been outscored 97-75 in the first half of their last 8 games. So if they have a slow start to this game, they're going to see a heavy dose of Henry. And that's as far as the Patriots' strong defense is concerned. You can run against them. We even saw a Browns team who struggled all throughout the year be able to pound the ball and run right at the Patriots. That's one area where you can really attack their defense also. So I'm with you. I like the Titans in here, and I think this could be a close game. I wouldn't be shocked if the Patriots win by 3, but I feel like you're getting a couple extra points in here if you can find that 5. So let's take the Titans plus the 5. They're just a lot of things to like. Vrabel knows Belichick. This game might be close and kind of back and forth. The Titans beat the Pats last year when they hooked up, and one area where the Patriots could succeed, the Titans struggle defending running back pass catchers. So maybe we see a lot of James White and a lot of Burkhead, but the skill players for the Patriots with a banged up Edelman, they don't scare me, Paul. They really don't.
It's funny, as the Patriots go into this game, they were the ones with the prolific offense, but they're probably saying to themselves, boy, we got to control the ball, milk the clock, and keep that Titan offense off the field.
Yeah.
And you know what? The way they're going to do it is, as you say, James White and Burkhead out of the backfield, because N'Keal Harry, Sanu, they're not weapons. And in fact, it's affecting Julian Edelman, because he had one catch midway through the third quarter against the Dolphins, because defenses are clamping down on him. So I agree with you. They're going to have to go to the running backs, speed the game up, and milk the clock, and hopefully come out of here with a 24-20 win somehow, which would still be a Titan cover.
Yeah, that's the way that I'm leaning. So I'm going to lean with the Titans in here as we move on to Sunday. So we have the 2 AFC games on Saturday, and then we have the 2 NFC games on Sunday. Morning game will be the Vikings at the Saints. It's moved up now to the Saints as an 8-point favorite. The over-under, I think, has crept up to 50 now. The Saints have really played well down the stretch. They had the one game where they lost to San Francisco, but their offense is really, really humming. I think they've scored 34 points in 6 of their last 7. In their last 3 games, they scored a touchdown 80% of the time they were in the red zone, and they've been a top 10 team in third down conversions all throughout the year. But it's not, Paul, not quite the same Saints team as last year where they ran the ball really well. This has been the prolific passing with Breeze, with Michael Thomas, and he's been getting Cook involved a lot more lately too. Cook is at over 70 yards receiving the last 6. it seems like it could be a lot of points because the Vikings aren't a bad football team in here. But I think of the four, this is probably, I guess, one. I'm not quite as confident in this way. I think I'd lean to the Saints in here. But what are some of your thoughts on this one?
Well, let's go back 2 years, and we all recall that crazy game. Stephon Diggs catches a touchdown, goes for 60-something, 61 yards, last play of the game, and they knocked the Saints out 29-24. And then last year, of course, that disputed call that went against New Orleans and catapulted the Rams into the championship game. So the Saints are definitely going to come in with a chip on the shoulder. And I might disagree with you on the running factor because they've gotten a lot of production out of Latavius Murray this year. And, of course, they had Ingram last year. But those two guys, Murray and Kamara, they've averaged a shade over 4.5 yards per carry, 300-something total rushing attempts. So you complement that with Michael Thomas, who is the best receiver in the league, 1,725 yards. His completion rate is an astounding 80.5%, which is better than Breeze's 74.3%. But normally that is propped up by passes to the running backs. This is a wideout. Now you get the Saints, they get back full strength on their offensive line. They got Pete and they got Warford back last week for the Carolina game. And they get Kiko Alonso back in the middle along with A.J. Klein. Von Bell, who had 89 tackles up until 3 weeks ago when he went out, he may be back. And they added Janoris Jenkins to strengthen their secondary. And Eli Apple has been ordinary anyway. So Janoris Jenkins is an upgrade. And then you look at Minnesota. I don't consider Minnesota a very good football team. You can be misled by scores at times. And if you look at that Charger game, 39-10, but it was 7 Charger turnovers. You look at the Detroit game, 20-7. It was David Blau. They've had some poor performances on defense. Dak went for 400 yards. Cowboys never should have lost that game on Sunday night. It was just some poor play calling at the end. Matt Moore, 25-35 for 275. Seattle put up 37 on him. The good thing for New Orleans, for Minnesota, is they do get Dalvin Cook back. He's definitely going to add to their offense, which was very lame against the Packers the week before last. But they have some injuries on defense. Eric Kendricks is questionable. Cornerback Alexander questionable. And then Stephen Weatherly, who has 3 sacks this year, he's also questionable. I just think the Saints are a much better football team. I could see New Orleans winning this by 20-plus points.
I think one point that you made I really like is when I do think the Vikings, when you dig in and you look at the numbers and some of like the advanced analytics and some of the DVOA and things like that, they look a lot better on paper than I think they are. And that could hurt them a little bit. Now, the only thing that does concern me would be some kind of a late, like, backdoor type cover. But, the more and more we discuss this, I think I would be a little more confident in the Saints, too. Because you look at, the Minnesota pass D on paper, it doesn't look that bad. But then when you break it down a little bit more, they're actually really bad covering wide receivers, which is not going to match up very well when they're trying to cover the best wide receiver in the game. They give up the 8th most yards to wide receivers in the league. They're a team that's pretty good they're pretty damn good in the red zone, Minnesota's defense, but I think this is a Saints D that is just Saints offense that is really, really firing probably better than we saw them all year. I was a little concerned in the first couple games when Breeze came back and that quickly that concern was quickly eliminated. To me, this might be the most well-rounded, or I think this might be, right up there with the Ravens for the best team in the league. I'm kind of bummed out that they had to play this extra game. Hopefully it won't end up mattering, but them having to go on the road to Lambeau could be something I worry about just from a weather perspective. If they were at home, I would really like the Saints all the way through. So it looks like we're both leaning Saints in here. You a little more confident than me, but I would definitely be on the Saints side. And I think anything under double digits, I would have to lean Saints.
By the way, Gino, I'm not concerned about Green Bay at all. In fact, it'll create line value when New Orleans goes in and beats them rather easily. Aaron Rodgers has been a shell of himself, and I'm not going to put it all on him, but they just don't get any separation from their receivers. Other than Devonta Adams, Lazard, Scantling, and Allison, no separation whatsoever. The Packers, think about that game against the 49ers. They were completely shut down, and that's not an aberration. They've struggled this year. Jimmy Graham is getting up in years. Look, they had a shot to score against Detroit first. Jimmy Graham drops the ball in the middle of the field, right in his hands. They're just not getting enough productivity from their skill positions. New Orleans will go into Lambeau and win the game.
And I believe I saw that Football Outsiders had ranked them as one of the worst 13-win teams in history, just based on their metrics. They end up the second worst 13-3 team ever, according to DVOA, and that doesn't generally fare well when you go into the playoffs and you have to play against tougher teams. So, you're right. We might get a little bit more value on the Saints just because them having to go on the road and people thinking Breeze can't win, outdoors or out of the dome. And let's see if the Saints can get through unscathed in this first week. You want to make sure you get through healthy, and get everybody out of the game early, and hopefully blow them out, and then focus in on a big weekend next weekend. And then the final game on Sunday. And man, talk about a couple of teams who are really banged up right now. We have Seattle going to Philly and playing. This is a rematch of a game from earlier this year, Week 12, when Seattle beat Philly 17-9. I see Seattle as a 1.5-point favorite in a lot of spots. The over/under in here is a 46 right now, but it's tough to start or even talk about this game at all without mentioning just all of the injuries on both sides.
Yeah, the Eagles have been absolutely decimated. I mean, you got guys in the lineup that were on the practice squad 7 weeks ago. Boston Scott stepped up on Sunday. He was their leading receiver. I think he had 4 catches, 84 yards. Josh Perkins was in the mix. Guys you've never heard of. Now, if you go back to that first game, 17-9, again, a little bit deceptive. It was 17-3. Philly got the ball back with a shade over 2 minutes, went down the field, closed the gap, made it 17-9. I don't recall seeing the end of the game, but probably Seattle went into a prevent to force them to milk the clock. But Zach Ertz, 12 catches for 91 yards that game, and he's likely not going to play here. Carson Wentz, 33 of 45, so Zach Ertz had more than 33% of the receptions, more than a third. So you just got offensive decimation here for the Eagles, and I think they're going to struggle to move the ball. You look at the last couple games. Look, the Giants, the scoreboard shows 34-17. This was a tight game in the third quarter. It was 17-17. Eagles kick a field goal. Danny Dimes drops back the pass, fumbles the ball. Eagles recover, take it down at a 1-yard line, punch it in the next play, and, the wheels fell off from there. They just don't have enough offensive weaponry to keep up with Seattle. And I understand Seattle's defense definitely is not what it was in years past, but it's going to be enough to snuff out an Eagles offense that just doesn't have a lot going for it right now. And they might have an issue on the offensive line as well. Miles Sanders in that first game, 12 carries, 63 yards. He has a high ankle sprain. There's going to be a lot of problems here for Philly to put up points. And I went Eagle team total on the 22.5.
This is a tough game for me to play, mainly just because we talked about the injuries and because Seattle, I'm hoping that Seattle will finally look at themselves in the mirror and say, okay, we can't really be, try to force running the ball if it doesn't work that much. Maybe the best case scenario in this particular game against a team that is not good defending the wide receivers. There were only 5 teams that allowed more yards to wide receivers this year than Philly, and they were 25th in yards per completion allowed. And so Metcalf and Lockett, if they take the the reins off of Wilson and let him throw the ball and let him just use them, and then I think Seattle's got a big shot. The only thing that concerns me a little bit about Seattle in this game, and I think I would probably just lean, and I'm not sure I'm going to play this game. If I was forced to, if I had to, I'd probably lean Eagles just because they're at home and they've got a little bit more momentum. I'm a little worried about that loss for Seattle last week. It might have been a bit demoralizing because that just changed the entire complexion of the whole NFC playoff picture. Getting in, getting a bye, getting home field, getting a week off where they could have had an opportunity to maybe get some of their key pieces back a week later. And now they got to go on the road. They got to travel across the country, and they got to play a team that they might look at and say, we beat this team up a little bit earlier in the year, and they don't have a lot going for them right now, like from a skill position standpoint. That's the only thing that worries me is, can they get up for this game? Obviously, it's a playoff game. You hope everybody gets up, but I just feel like that was a tough loss last week when as much as there was a bad call that was against them, they were their own worst enemy also. I agree that too many times when there's a bad call in the game, if a team, screws themselves, everyone wants to go, well, they had the opportunities, sure, but the bad call still happened. They're separate issues. We're not just okay with bad calls. It's just been part of the games this year, really. It's just unfortunate. But I'm leaning Eagles in here, but This is going to be a tight game. I'm glad they put this game on as the primetime game because, as you mentioned, the commentators and the announcers are going to be having to do their homework with some of the skill position players that are out there that we've never heard of. They're gonna be deep into the practice squad and deep into players that have not caught a lot of passes and have not run a lot of balls this year. But Boston Scott will try to continue the legend. He had 138 yards on 23 touches and 3 touchdowns against the Giants. I guess I'd slightly lean Eagles in here, but I'm pretty pumped with the 4-game slate that we have because I don't think we could see the Saints game maybe being a blowout, but I feel like the other 3 games will probably be pretty tight as we've seen by the point spreads. Doesn't feel like there are any really horrible teams. Even this Eagles team who was in a bad division all year, they're banged up. They're not bad. They're just hurt. There's a difference, and they can still get up and for a game or two, or Wentz can kind of carry you for a while. But I think it'll really come down to these 2 really good quarterbacks. Wilson, who has been right below Jackson as an MVP candidate all throughout the year. And I mean, wow, you get 1 yard last week and and then we're talking about San Francisco playing in this game.
Yeah, that was amazing. And I guess the blown call you're referring to is the missed PI against Foster in the end zone.
Yes.
And that's appalling. What was appalling is that they did not go to a review.
Take a look.
Yeah, you missed a call. It happens. The human factor is in play, but you got to go to the review. They neglected to do so, and that's where I find fault. Now, as far as you mentioning pass coverage, back in that first game, Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby played.
Yeah.
These are good corners. At least one of them is going to be out Sunday. That's problematic. You also look at the tight end for the Giants, Smith. He had 8 catches Sunday. So I think Russell Wilson's going to go back to Hollister this game. And as far as your point, with Seattle being deflated, I would agree with you in some cases, not so much here because this is a battle-tested playoff team.
They've
been through this before. I'm sure they've shaken it off. Pete Carroll is a motivator. I think they could put it behind them. I think they'll go into Philly. They'll play their game. They're a little bit undermanned on defense. They've been giving up a lot of yards. And if you look 2 back against Arizona, the offense was futile in a 27-13 loss. So I have my concerns about the Seahawks, and I think if Philly wins this game, it's going to have to be low scoring. I find fair value on the total here, maybe 43.5 to 44, so at 46 is definitely value.
Yeah, you mentioned the Seattle battle-tested, the number 2 strength of schedule this year. So they played some tough teams all the way through. I mean, you think of the list of the best teams in the league, they played them, and they played the 49ers twice, and they played the Rams twice, who were one of the better teams to not make the playoffs. Yeah, so, yeah, they had a tough schedule all the way through. This should be a fun opening weekend, and I'm pretty pumped. Generally, there's like two games that were like, I could really care less about this game. Feels like that's going to be a crush. I like these matchups. I just thought that there were nobody to me. You take Baltimore out of the mix. And then everybody else, there were a group of pretty good teams, and then below that there were some really bad teams. But I didn't feel like there were, a top tier of like really, really dominant teams this year, and it should make for a fun few weekends of playoff football.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking forward to it again. The only thing I'm not looking forward to, I don't like these playoff games starting at 10 a.m. And I'm an East Coast guy, and I still can't get used to these early start times. And you figure in the playoffs you're going to get a little reprieve, but no, you get in my opinion, one of the better games of the weekend. You got Drew Brees and Minnesota, and it starts at 10 a.m. But I'll pry myself out of bed and hope for a big Saints victory. I've been in that stadium before, and it's just an exciting atmosphere, and I'm sure it'll be rocking in New Orleans in the Big Easy.
Awesome. So let the folks out there know where we can find you. This was a lot of fun. We'll have to have you back on again soon. And when we move from football season on, we can start talking basketball, and we can go back and forth about the Lakers and LeBron, and we can have some fun talking college hoops and some horse racing here and there. What are you going to be working on? Where can we find some of your writing, and where can we follow you on social media?
So I'm at Paul Bovi on Twitter. My picks are sold on VegasInsider.com. And I have to make a comment about the Lakers. So if you happen to have gone to bed last night and laid 11.5 points,
wow,
the Lakers having a 33-point lead. And I say go to bed because I'm still in that East Coast mode, although I've been 14 years removed from New York. If you went to bed thinking you had a cover and the Lakers win by 10, how do you feel in the morning? When the Lakers chuck a lead like that. And that's where my problem comes in with sports gambling on the NBA, because the players don't always have your best interest at heart. Okay. At some point, there's a divide between their objective and your objective. They're thinking post-game festivities. You're thinking close this one out.
The Lakers led by as many, this is from ESPN Stats and Info, Lakers led by as many as 36 points and only won by 10. They are the 653rd team over the last 20 years to lead a game by at least 36 points, and their 10-point margin of victory is the smallest margin of victory of any of them. The average margin of victory by those teams is 33 points. And it got a little tight. I mean, there was one point with like a minute and a half left. They were down by 6. They were up by 6. And Phoenix had the ball, and they got a wide open look at a 3 that could have very easily cut it to 3 in a one-possession game. Leading into the fourth quarter, it looked like AD and LeBron were getting the ice all ready for their knees, and they had to get back up and get into the game, which I'm sure they didn't like at all. So, yeah, that was I got to say, that was a complete laying an egg late. That's one of those games where I'm just happy to wipe my hands and move on with the W.
Why am I not surprised that you watched it till the bitter end? I actually shut the game off. I said, "This is I have 2 screens upstairs," and I said, I'm going to put on a sitcom on one of them, and I just shut it off. And lo and behold, I wake up this morning and I see a comment on Twitter about the Lakers not covering. I said, "No, that is impossible."
It was bad. So, Paul, this was a whole lot of fun. I really appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to having you back again. And let's make some money this weekend.
Thanks, Gino.
And that was Paul Bovi. We'll be right back with the final segment here.
Big thank you to Paul for that discussion. That was actually the first time I've talked with Paul on the phone. As I mentioned, we've gone back and forth a little bit on social media. Really sharp guy, you could tell. He does his homework too. Excellent handicapper. So look forward to having him back on as a regular guest here on That's What G Said podcast. Let's give just a little recap on my picks, because it was probably all over the place when you were hearing me kind of talk it out with Scott and then talk it out with Paul. So let's give you the picks recap. I'm going to go Buffalo plus the 2.5. I also think money line there. I'm going to go Titans plus the 5. I do think the Patriots win the game, but it just feels like that's too many points for me. So Buffalo plus 2.5, Titans plus 5, Saints minus the 8 there, and the Eagles plus the 1.5. With Buffalo and the Eagles, I'd go money line on both of those. Get you a little, because I just feel like they'll both win the games straight up. So Buffalo plus the 2.5 in the money line, Titans plus the 5, Saints minus the 8, Eagles plus the 1.5 in the money line. So far this year, 49-43. Great start to the year, struggled in the middle, and then good end to the year. So let's keep it rolling here. Best of luck on Wild Card Weekend. We'll have something similar next weekend where we bring on a couple guests to discuss the divisional playoff round in the NFL. I'm going to close things out with some horse racing for Saturday and for Sunday. Before we do, I want to mention Thrive Fantasy, one of the sponsors of That's What G Said. If you go right now to Thrive Fantasy, download the app, and deposit $10, I'm going to give you at least a little bonus here. Right now, all you got to do is go deposit $10 on the Thrive Fantasy app, and you'll get a $10 bonus credit just by using the promo code GINO. It's DFS for prop betting. So if you're someone who likes to bet a lot of props, this is really fun. Go check it out. Like any service, I will always play it myself. Make sure that you can, the depositing the money, the withdrawing the money, everything works out great. I won a contest a few weeks ago, was able to withdraw all the money on PayPal very nicely. You can see my name on there. That's what G said, so we'll be playing against each other in all sorts of contests. If you have any questions about Thrive Fantasy, just let me know. I can explain it to you. I can help get you all set up. Anytime you get a little free bonus, you might as well give it a look, right? So use that promo code GINO, deposit at least $10, and you'll get that $10 bonus credit right back. Horse racing, get your past performances out. Let's start with the Saturday, the Fairgrounds. So we're going to have a couple plays from Fairgrounds Saturday, one from Gulfstream, and then a couple plays from Fairgrounds on Sunday. I didn't really love what I saw over at Santa Anita a whole lot this weekend. And at Gulfstream Park, it seems to me, pretty formful in a lot of the races. So, we never try to force it. Let's go to Fairgrounds for Saturday, January the 4th. And let's go to race number 2. And we're going to go to the 5, Thai Chili Sue. She's not done a whole lot wrong in her 4-race career. If you notice, she won her first couple starts over at Evangeline. Then she stepped up and she tried a much, much tougher group on the grass at Keeneland. That first level allowance, she was 60-1 that day, and she was just completely overmatched. Now, that was in October, and she was sent to the bench for a couple months. She came back on December the 15th, and I thought she ran really well. She took back. She was 5th of 8. She was tucked inside. She was 6 off, and then she got stuck waiting behind horses. She had to wait while the winner got a clear trip, and Thai Chili Sue was unlucky chasing slow fractions that day. Had to angle out wide, but by then it was just too late. She ran well when she got an opening. She was up for 3rd. Now she's going to go second start off the short break. The lone poor performance was against much tougher at Keeneland. We're going to make a win wager on the number 5, Thai Chili Sue. If we get anything around 3-1, that is worthy of a win wager on Thai Chili Sue. That's race number 2 at Fairgrounds on Saturday. Let's go to race number 3 at Fairgrounds. And we're going to go to the number 5 in here, Dancing Waves. Dancing Waves was claimed by Broberg last time out, was a very impressive winner at Delta. And you look up and down this race, there is really no speed at all in here. I think Dancing Waves, stretching back out from a couple sprint races, looks like the one to catch. You'll notice she shows more speed when she's routing. There's just nobody in here that has that type of speed. She's not even really that quick. It's a slow group, a group that wants to kind of sit and stalk. Maybe Gavin's little sis can sit close, but I think the real key to the race is, and the real way that Dancing Waves wins this is, let's just get aggressive, stretching out. Second time Broberg. The number 5, Dancing Waves. We'll make a win wager if we can get anything over 5-2. And then we're going to go to race number 8 at Fairgrounds. And we're going to go to the number 7, Chase the Ghost. Look who Chase the Ghost was facing earlier in the year. War of Will, Owendale, Baracho, Country House. Talking about some nice horses there. And if you were able to kind of dig through his past performances, you can make some legitimate excuses for some of the poor performances, right? Last time out, November the 23rd, they tried the slop. You can make an easy excuse, put a line right through that race. Go a couple starts back. That was in the race in June. Well, that was the race that sent Chase the Ghost to the bench now for quite some time. From June to November, there was probably a physical issue that day. The May race, that was a pretty tough group against, a group of older in May at Churchill Downs. Prior to that, the race against Baracho jumps off the page when running second that day. Just a repeat of that effort where Chase the Ghost finished in front of Hidden Scroll. I would win this race. Now you're going to go second time for Cassie. I think because of some recency where, the last few efforts we haven't seen good races from Chase the Ghost, that's only going to build the price up a little bit. And he has more early speed than he's been able to show in his last few. Second off the break, second time Norm Cassie. I wouldn't be shocked to see this guy show a little more speed. Chase the Ghost. We'll make a win wager if we can get anything over 7-2 on Chase the Ghost. And then we're going to go on Saturday. So the 3 plays from Fairgrounds. Second race, the number 5, Thai Chili Sue. Third race, the number 5, Dancing Waves. 8th race, the number 7, Chase the Ghost. Let's go to Gulfstream Park for Saturday. Just one play at Gulfstream Park on Saturday. We're going to go to race number 9. It is the Ginger Brew Stakes. The 3 moral reasoning is the play in here. I'd be surprised if he's 6-1. Anything over 5-2 looks like a win wager for me. His debut, he's only raced twice. She's only raced twice, 3-year-old filly. In her debut, she was in a really strong, loaded race. She was second that day, and she had a slow start. She worked her way through traffic. She was up to 6. She was 3 deep. She was 5 off, and she won the battle for second. She was geared down winning that battle. And then second time out, just loved her November 8th victory. It was a slowish start from the rails. She moved up mid-pack, but she ran up onto the heels of a rival. Then she got shuffled back a little bit. She lost some momentum. She lost a few lengths, but she waited. She angled to the outside in a nice, sustained rally for an in-hand, geared-down, super impressive victory. Going 6 furlongs on the grass at Aqueduct. Let's go to the number 3, Moral Reasoning. We'll make a win wager if we can get anything over 5-2. So that's going to be our only play at Gulfstream Park on Saturday. The number 3, Moral Reasoning. And we head to Fairgrounds. 2 plays on Sunday at Fairgrounds. Let's go to race number 3. Get your past performances out for January the 5th. Race number 3. Let's go to the number 6, Banshee Birdie. Another instance where this race just does not seem to have any speed signed on paper. And I think Banshee Birdie, who just took a field gate to wire on December the 13th, will try the same thing in here, drawn to the outside, so they can kind of play a little cat and mouse with the field. Let's go Banshee Birdie. Hooks a field with no speed, the outside draw, key off the overall turf form, put a line through the race in the slop, 2 starts back. And then when you dig in, you see this is a horse who's run really well in all of her starts on the grass. The one at Churchill where she's just seemed a little bit overmatched. She was in really tough that day, and that was coming off the bench. Banshee Birdie, the number 6. We'll make a win wager if we can get 7-2 in here. And then we move to race number 6. And we're going to go to the number 2, Singapore Flash. If you look at all of Singapore Flash's races, he's been a little unlucky in that he's faced some massive fields. 11-10, 11-10, 11 in his 5 starts. And so you look at the races, his second start where he finished 5th, and then his third start where he finished 6th. Those races really weren't that bad. They were in big fields. He ran in some spots. He showed some ability. Obviously, the race that jumps off the page to me is the November 1st Lone Grass race when he was a really good third. And then he tried to get on the grass, and they actually tried to get on the grass against Tougher, against First Level Allowance Company, but that race was rained off the grass, and you can put a line right through the November 23rd effort. Let's just put a ring right around that November 1st race, and that was against Better at Churchill Downs. If we get anything close to that type of effort, I think Singapore Flash is going to be in really good shape in here. Let's make a win wager on the number 2, Singapore Flash, if we can get anything around 4-1. So your Sunday plays at Fairgrounds, race number 3, the number 6, Banshee Birdie, and race number 6, the number 2, Singapore Flash. That's going to do it for this episode of That's What G Said podcast. A big thank you to Scott Shapiro, a big thank you to Paul Bovi, some NFL. Next week, we will have Andrew Champagne on early in the week. We're going to go through an article that he wrote about some ways to kind of fix horse racing, and we're going to break that article down, and we'll go back and forth on it. And then upcoming in the next few weeks, we have Jason Beam lined up. The Beamy Awards are coming up in a few weeks, so we'll have him on probably the end of next week to preview those. Joe Christofek from Fairgrounds will be coming on to talk some Fairgrounds racing with us one of these next few weekends. We'll kind of weekend card, and we can go the card with him. And if you have any free time, please head on over. It just takes a second or two to iTunes. Leave us a nice little 5-star rating and review. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube, on SoundCloud, on Google Podcasts, on TuneIn. That way, every time we record an episode of That's What G Said, it'll be delivered right to you. best of luck. Have a nice weekend, everyone. We'll be back next week with another episode of That's What G.
So you